Hello everyone! Sorry if my voice sounds off at any point, I have COVID and it's given me a really bad throat for the past 2 days. Yay! Today I want to talk about a topic that I have alluded to previously, and it's something that I feel very strongly about, and that is the movement being spearheaded by animation workers rallying for better working conditions and rights. I first saw that this movement started to be more noticeable following the announcement of the Cuphead show's second season, though the situation is not connected solely to Cuphead, bearing in mind, and has been going on for much longer, but it did seem to end up opening the floodgates for many non-animators to discover what was happening within the industry. For reference, we will go into this more in depth shortly. Netflix skimped out on paying the animators of the Cuphead show for 2 seasons by ordering 1 season and splitting it into 2. We're going to be looking into the way in which streaming services such as Netflix have both produced a huge boom in animation popularity through shows like this one, but have also made things worse for the people creating them by attempting to cut every corner imaginable in order to maximise their profits. But Netflix isn't the only platform that has been doing shady things lately, or ever. We will also be delving into the less than savoury practices of the media conglomerate Disney. Don't think you're getting away with anything, Ratman. I have some words for you too. Long words. Difficult to pronounce words. So if you're excited to hear me tell these companies a new one, then please stick around. And if you like what you're seeing and hearing, then please consider liking and subscribing. I'm Fiona Apollo and I do art commentary. Please bear in mind that this video obviously will not encompass everything going on because of course, new information is coming out every day and I'm only one person, so please don't pop off at me if I forget something. Just leave a comment below and I'll be happy to look over it when I'm not dying. Let's begin. So why did this seem to become such a huge thing following Cuphead of all things? Cuphead released on the 18th of February to a positive reception. Many people were really excited to watch the show due to how spectacular the game was, though some negative Nancys wanted to cry about how they didn't animate the show completely traditionally, just like the game, which was an incredibly stupid request, FYI. The show was only given a certain amount towards its budget. This isn't Arcane. I myself finally found the time to sit down and watch it when I saw that an old classmate had posted on Facebook that he did some work on the show, and I was not about to pass that up considering he was the best animator out of all of us back in uni. The show was good. It definitely had some parts where it could have been bolstered a bit, but everything about it on a technical side was stunning as far as I was concerned. Was it a perfect story? No. It's an homage to the 1930s silly symphonies, which never had much substance in those stories to begin with, and asking for a more in-depth narrative kind of misses that point. There is beauty in its simplicity. The plot didn't need to be a masterpiece. Not long after this, however, and it really wasn't long at all, it was like 1 or 2 weeks I think, Netflix announced that Season 2 would be arriving in the summer of 2022, and that was when people started becoming really suspicious because there was no way a second season could be produced that quickly if it hadn't been wrapped up beforehand. And eventually we found out that that was the case, and these were not separate seasons, they were batches of the same group of episodes created at the same time, and that Netflix had been doing this for several different shows by now. So why is this such a big deal? The reason why people got so upset at this is because when a series has proven to be popular with viewers and gets greenlit for a new season, this is generally the time when workers' contracts are reviewed and better wages are negotiated. If you want to keep on the people who made the show such a big hit the first time around, you need to give them a reason to stay before they find something better. That's how it goes. Or at least that's how it used to go. So what Netflix decided to do, instead of rewarding these workers for a job well done, is they ordered a large batch of episodes at once, which presumably equated to some crunch time happening, but that's not for me to confirm, even though we probably don't even need to, and split these episodes into separate seasons to avoid those negotiations altogether. And I also just want to inform you all that it isn't just Netflix doing this. It turns out that HBO did the exact same thing with all 4 seasons, including the season 5 script of Infinity Train being done in one huge batch with equally no opportunity to negotiate. And wouldn't you know it, Netflix are also trying to do the same thing with Stone Ocean. Classy. This is an incredibly slimy practice, and not long after, animation workers began to come out with their own stories in that similar vein of how they were done dirty by companies and studios, and a lot more forced than they were previously. And let me tell you, some of these stories are absolutely damning. It's no secret that Netflix and streaming services in general have contributed to a massive boom for animation both in its production and its popularity. In 2021, 4 out of the 5 most streamed shows were animated, and there has been a larger emphasis on animation being shifted more towards mature topics and themes, which is something that we have needed for a long time. However, we can't ignore this. No matter how good it may be for the consumer, at some point this bubble is going to burst, and it looks like we're getting pretty damn close. When I broke my drawing arm in a traffic accident, I was told if I couldn't do the job, I couldn't do the job. I said maybe I could rough things with my left arm if I could get some help with cleanup, but was refused. so I brute forced my way through 2 episodes with a broken arm. My work punished me for taking a week off to get married. I needed to fly home for a city hall marriage. Because they didn't find anybody to fill my spot, they took away essentially 3 months of work from me and ended my contract early. As part of production, we face different issues. With no union to protect us, inhumane practices are allowed to happen in our industry. And sadly, most people don't know about it. But I'm going to stand up despite my fear and shed some light on it. I have worked as a story revisionist, editor, TD, etc., and will never get the credit/money I'm entitled to, just so studios can save money or save face with their superiors. They dangle opportunity in front of us to get free work out of us, and it needs to stop. It was never production versus artists. It's always been us versus the studios. These are a select few of the many heartbreaking stories being shared about this issue. This has been going on far longer than Cuphead. Animators are expected to meet deadlines within a very minimal time frame, and this is causing people to forego sleep, social lives, general hygiene, and is piling on an excessive amount of stress on individuals, which can have a variety of mental and physical consequences, such as joint pain and stress disorders. Storyboarders are expected to help out with scripts, composition, sound work, character design, and keyframe animation, despite the fact that jobs such as a storyboard revisionist are considered entry-level and therefore don't receive a very high salary. So all of a sudden they're expected to do 10 different jobs for the salary of one? That doesn't make sense! And just because I know someone is going to bring it up, why am I so bothered about this as someone who is no longer pursuing animation as a career and who is far removed from the events taking place in the United States? Well, I don't know how to tell you this, but people can still be invested and want to help spread the word on an issue, despite not being directly affected. It's called having empathy. Also, what happens in areas where an industry's largest or most prominent concentration is found can have a domino effect on places outside of those areas. Places like Los Angeles and New York are some of the largest producers of animated content, and as a result are followed by others as an example of how to conduct certain practices. Industries in general are a lot more connected than you think they are, and when one section goes down, we all bear the consequences. And guess what? Places like Europe and Asia need better conditions too, and if workers in America can secure a better deal for better conditions, hopefully other parts of the world will feel empowered to follow suit. In Japan, back in 2017, Kazunari Mizuno, who worked as an animator on anime like Naruto and Bleach, passed away from overworking at age 52 while working on Naruto Shippuden. Mizuno had taken a break from his work for a nap after reportedly being awake for days and died in his sleep, and these conditions, sadly, have just not improved even after such a tragic loss. Another aspect that was getting people riled up when all of this was happening was in an article published by Vulture. Mike Moon, who is now responsible for overseeing Netflix's adult animation ventures, made this comment that got a fair few people bristling. Question: historically, broadcast networks liked animation because it was much more cost-effective. The price tag was just smaller. Is that still the case these days? Answer: I do think one of the challenges is how long the timelines have been to produce shows. Over the next few years, you're going to see a lot of innovation in terms of a quicker, more reactive pipeline. Most of these shows are still produced in a pipeline that dates back to the 1970s, so I think you're going to see a lot of innovation. Now, I have read this full article, and personally, the rest of it really isn't as inflammatory as this one section ended up being, but it really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and for good reason. How the hell are people who are already struggling to meet existing deadlines expected to work even faster than they already are? The only feasible way that I can think that they will do that is by doubling or even tripling the teams who are working on these projects, but even then, if they're also talking about making it more cost effective, that means they would have to cut back on wages even more, or produce lower quality shows, which, This mindset becomes even more unsettling when you become aware that shows made by streaming services are done under the new media side letter, which means workers are already making less than union minimums and get very few vacation days, if any. This side letter was negotiated back in 2009, when streaming services were only just starting out, and therefore it is woefully outdated when taking into account just how explosively streaming has become a part of modern media consumption. I also found it incredibly tactless to make the comment that the animation pipeline has been stuck in the 70s, considering this isn't true in the slightest, and the pipeline can often change in as little as 6 months depending on the project and what's involved with it. For someone who has apparently been an animator for 15 years, I don't think Mike Moon has been especially invested in keeping up to date with the industry at large outside of his own bubble. But why? Why has everything gotten to the level that it has? Well, I have a few theories, and they are theories, so make of them what you will, but the first and most simple answer is that people just do not take animation seriously, and still view it as a children's medium despite all the strides that have been made regarding shows like BoJack Horseman or films like Flea. The fact that live-action writers are paid more than double compared to their animation counterparts should speak volumes to that. During awards shows, a lot of judges will openly admit to only nominating productions from big studios like Disney because they either don't watch the films themselves or base their judgments solely on what their kids seem to enjoy. And that fact becomes even weirder when you have things like Sophia the First and Archer being nominated for the exact same category. Do you guys not watch your kids or something? I don't know why I'm asking that, because I know the answer. When we did a practice pitch for the BBC a few years ago, they told us that children as young as 8 were watching things like Rick and Morty. This kind of stigma also probably isn't helped by things like the Oscars describing animated films as something adults have to endure. Okay, Jeeves, if you really are that unimaginative and boring, just say that and go home. I'm not even going to get into the mess that is the Oscars. I do not care what a bunch of delusioned millionaires have to say about anything. I get that children watching films over and over can be frustrating, but that shouldn't impact your ability to do your job as a fucking judge and remain professional. The second theory is that it's because the animation industry has become much more diverse. We have seen an uptick in black and brown creators, women and gender non-conforming folks, and of course the LGBTQ+ in the last decade. The problem with this though is that 1, these people are being prevented from actually moving up in the industry, and 2, the people in the big seats are very bigoted and will use this as an excuse to reduce and devalue the field of animation at large because they don't respect these people enough to the point where they will invent reasons to cut costs wherever they can. And because these groups have always had to fight for the bare minimum, many of us don't fully know what that minimum should be as a result, and this is especially dangerous for those who are just starting out. We have seen this happen already with other industries like the sciences. You may have come across the term women in STEM becoming kind of a trendy phrase online, and it is amazing to see more women pursuing a career in STEM because it is historically seen as a male-dominated industry and was cited for the longest time as being a career that boasted a high intelligence to be able to flourish in. But now that more women are joining the STEM field, all of a sudden people are diminishing it a lot more because it is being viewed as a quote-unquote girly science, and the money that these people are seeing is lessened overall because of things such as the gender pay gap. And I believe it's a similar thing happening with animation, but because this increased diversity is more noticeable through what comes across on screen, I think they are faring far worse because of this. And on the topic of diversity, let's finally talk about what Disney's been up to, shall we? So the other reason I'm speaking on all of this is where the rat house comes in, and this is where the scope of who gets affected by these companies becomes a lot more generalised outside of just the workers. It has been found amongst everything else going on, even though I don't think anyone is truly surprised, that Disney has been funding campaigns in support of Florida's Don't Say Gay bill. This bill is a huge step backwards for the queer community, as it prevents the teachings of LGBTQ+ subjects from kindergarten age to 3rd grade, which in non-American I think is around age 5 to 8 or 9, and makes the topics optional for higher grades. This bill also allows parents to sue schools for teaching these subjects in any capacity. No matter what anyone tries to argue regarding the fact that it has nothing to do with animation, this bill is going to hurt people everywhere because let's face it, people are more incentivized by the big print than the small print, which means that those who are against the LGBTQ will try to apply it in every possible way to silence the community. And that in itself is a truly horrible revelation on its own, but it wouldn't sting nearly as much if Disney didn't do stuff like, I don't know, sell rainbow merch or throw up a half-assed inspirational quote online during Pride Month to try and tap into that deprived queer market. And it's important to note that they do this for other social movements too, such as Black Lives Matter. It's just very disappointing every single time when a social movement is being lobbied behind for a company's gain, only to be forgotten about a month later when it stops being profitable. I'm not going to go into this bill's policies in depth or anything like that, because I want to keep this relegated to its effects on the creative industry, and I'm also not American. But I think that, quite frankly, everyone involved in that bill deserves to find cat poop in all of their shoes. Whether or not the bill passed as well is also irrelevant, because the sheer act of being involved in something like this does not suddenly get diminished if the aim is not achieved. If someone pushed you to try and beat you in a race but you win anyway, they still pushed you and you still have the right to condemn them for it. Even Pixar spoke out against this. In an open letter, Pixar employees have stated that nearly every instance of overtly gay affection has been cut from their films. We at Pixar have personally witnessed beautiful stories full of diverse characters come back from Disney corporate reviews shaved down to crumbs of what they once were. Even if creating LGBTQIA content was the answer to fixing the discriminatory legislation in the world, we are being barred from creating it. The people working on these films are not at fault for the lack of representation we see in them. If anything, they are the ones fighting the hardest to keep it in. It's the fault of the people in power that these aspects are never allowed to fully cultivate due to this archaic view of what constitutes as family-friendly, taking precedence in the name of what will rake in the most cash. Being queer is not sexual. I hate that I have to keep explaining this as an ace lesbian. The ones who sexualize queerness the most are the ones who don't know how to separate relationships from sex. And that goes for people both in and out of the community, by the way. If you can't do that, then that is a you problem, and other people shouldn't have to diminish the realities for your comfort. It's also worth noting that Disney did try to do damage control with this by attempting to pledge $5 million to the Human Rights Campaign and other LGBTQ rights organisations, but the donation was refused. Make of that what you will, but I personally stand by them with that. Don't let people buy your support if they have been shown to repeatedly be at odds with your own morals. The fact that people take issue with that is laughable because that money is probably the same money they sponged up from exploiting the queer animation workers. Circle of life, am I right? They even apparently tried to save face by reinstating a same-sex kiss in the upcoming Lightyear film, but at this point I don't know if I believe them, so we'll just have to wait and see on that one. I just don't trust anything Disney says anymore, and it's been that way for several years now. Let's not forget that Disney has a track record of trying to take credit for creating the first ever gay character in a Disney film over and over and fucking over again, and when you finally sit down to watch whatever the hell they're preaching about on their high horse, it is either a side character we never see again with a line of dialogue so vague that homophobes have plenty of ammunition to rebuff you on it, a deeply problematic trope such as the idiot villain sidekick having a one-sided crush on the big baddie who more or less uses and abuses them, or a character with a line that is easily erasable in translated versions of the film. None of this is what we want, and when they do finally allow us to have something amazing in a TV show like The Owl House, it gets cancelled because one executive apparently doesn't like it. This is just a really upsetting situation because it's not just the fact that workers are being prevented from having a decent work-life balance that we are kicking up a fuss about here, even if that is a big part of it. Even if viewers and bystanders are not being directly affected by the animation industry's working conditions, we are being affected by the act of trying to push back against any potential for representation of other groups that aren't considered the default. Even if you are not gay, or trans, or black, or Asian, having a more diverse pool of stories can still give you something to cling to within that narrative, and you may be surprised with what you can discover about yourself when you are allowed to indulge in stories that aren't just about people like you. That is the whole point of Disney films! So what can we do about all of this? On the 20th of March, a rally headed by the Animation Guild was held in Burbank, California to demand negotiations for a new deal for animation workers. They are advocating for better working conditions, longer deadlines, less crunch time, better benefits, and more accommodations for disabled animators and those who may need additional support. Disney Animation employees also staged a walkout to protest the company's involvement with the Don't Say Gay bill and have been walking out every day since the 15th of March. At the time of recording this script, I don't fully know the outcomes of these demonstrations quite yet, but I'm really hoping it manages to do something. The best possible way for us to contribute is to stay informed and to continue talking about these issues. Follow hashtags like New Deal for Animation, Storycraft Unite, Disney Do Better, and others that have similar goals. Follow animators and influential people in the industry like Dana Terrace, creator of The Owl House, who has been hosting charity live streams to donate money to several human rights organisations. Dana has been extremely brave to defy Disney and has spoken up about how she's sick of making them look good when all they do is push back against any kind of progression, which includes the cancellation of her own series and forcing it to wrap up early as a result. If you see any petitions from credible sources and websites relating to the issue, sign them. If you can't due to being in the wrong country or anything like that, share them so others can. Some things not to do would be to engage with the companies who are perpetrating these issues because online, once an account becomes a certain size, all engagement becomes good engagement. You could be swearing your head off and ranting about Netflix's practices in a YouTube comment or a quote tweet, but all that's going to do is promote Netflix to more people who won't see you saying these things because that's just how algorithms work. Instead, focus your attention on the individual animators and interact with them in order to give their voices a larger reach. That's all I have to say on this. Say what you will about whether or not I have the right to be talking about any of this, but animation was my dream for several years, and it was ripped away from me before I could truly begin. And to be honest, with the way the industry has gone, I'm almost thankful in a way. But the difference between me and the workers currently fighting against these kinds of conditions is that my circumstance was out of anyone's control, but we can pull together to help those who are in the thick of it right now, and I hope that many people do. Thank you for watching, and if you liked this video, please like, comment, and share if you can. The more people who are aware of these issues and are talking about them, the better. I know that the Roundtable is also doing a video on this, and from the sound of it, they will be going into much more detail than I have here. So keep your eyes peeled for that one, and I will also provide a link to it when it goes live. Stay safe, everyone. Bye!